I started these YouTube videos because I wanted to share something of my my conception of philosophy and knowledge and culture and all these things that seem very distant and ethereal and elevated in some ways. And then I also wanted to share the ideas that something of the what the spark that makes one interested in doing this thing rather than that thing. It had been a long time ago that I encountered a copy of Dr. Hawking's book, Brief History of Time, and I started reading it not knowing anything about physics, and I immediately recognized that it was a subject that was far beyond what I had ever really brought into my vision. Yeah, it wasn't for me, but I stuck with it. See, I made it. I made that thing. I made that thing something that I would understand something of. And it was important to me. It was one of the most important books I ever read because I don't think I understood science until I read it. I didn't have a conception really of what scientists are trying to do, how difficult it is to do what they do, and how, in a way, today it's not that way anymore because of Stephen, because he succeeded. See, he succeeded at explaining to people today. Today I could probably go around this neighborhood and I could find young kids like that who could tell me, say, cosmology, that's the study of the stars. They could not have done that before. There's no way. And they know now, see? They know what physics is. So they go to school knowing what science is. And if their instructors at school aren't as good as they should be, their students are causing them to rise to that occasion today. Because of people like Stephen, who decided to convey his knowledge, his vision of the whole, if you will, of the whole universe. In that book where he said, when I was young, I didn't know whether I wanted to study particle physics or cosmology. And really, as a scientist today, I think it's interesting that he looked at it that way then. That if he took up cosmology, he wouldn't be taking up particle physics, or if he took up particle physics, he wouldn't be taking up cosmology. But that really is only due to the success of his enterprise. See, when he went into that field, those two things hadn't been fused together in the minds of people as they are today. So he changed that entire discipline, and he brought that thing to people. People in this neighborhood who said, "Oh yeah, I went to school 70 years ago and I only went to 8th grade, but I love astronomy, or I love particle physics, or I love thinking about the atom." And I think that's true. And so I think he deserves this tribute that I'm giving him. And since I'm reflecting on that, I also, owe a tribute to Robert Pippin. I have been critical of him in one of my posts, and he and I have, I think, been having something of a disagreement or an attempt to understand each other on the issue of nihilism and what that is in culture, and whether or not that's the path that people should be urged to, or whether or not their lowest desires should be thought of as what we gear activity to. I want him to know that for me it is really just discussion and persuasion, and it's not violence, it's not fighting, it's not disagreeing. but I learned from him. I learned from that scholar as well, Robert B. Pippin. I have learned from him an enormous amount about Strauss. I don't think I could have written my MA thesis without him. So I am not in any kind of opposition to him. I've had a philosophical debate with him, and as I said, as I emphasized in my previous post, if he was depriving me of rights or something like that, and I had proof of that, then that would be something that I, as a man, I would have to confront him with. I don't have that proof, and I'm not a violent man, and that is not the way I deal with things. But I want him to know that for me, it has been nothing but a friendly dispute, and it really is trying to understand. We're still trying to understand. I'm still trying to understand Strauss. I've got some lines down there, right there, of a biography of Strauss. If I understood everything about Strauss and I thought, hey, I'm going to tell everybody else what Strauss is, then I wouldn't be writing about Strauss anymore. And I don't look at it that way. And a long time ago, I started, like when I started reading Dr. Hawking's book, Brief History of Time, I started reading Robert B. Pippin's Kant's Theory of Form. And I didn't get a chance to read it. I don't know what was going on in my life then. But I started reading it. It was too difficult for me. And so I had ordered it at the Rockford Library. And I couldn't understand it. So I had not yet read the critique by Kant. And I have since read the critique 1.4 times or so. And so now I might be in a position to understand his book, Kant's Theory of Form. And I may read it now. And I hope that he can see himself now as entering into, because he's probably done as much for the University of Chicago and for postmodernist philosophy as Dr. Hawking has done for Cambridge. And so that's what I have to say. I for a brief time, I became a filmmaker, and I know what that's like now, and I'm done making films. And I'm done shooting, and I'm not going to become a great film artist. But if I've recommended that others become that, I've done it because I think they'd be good at it, and because and I haven't not done it because I don't want to do it, but I'm done with this kind of filmmaking now. And I've presented my views on a number of subjects, and I've thrown them out there, and people can do what they want with them, and take them for what they're worth. They're worth, they're worth what you get from them. If you can take something away, or you can mine something out of them that is good for a discipline that you're attempting to learn. Or if I exhorted some people, hey, you do a good translation like Messiaen's, I think you'd do an excellent translation of Faust. I really believe that. I don't say that with irony. And so that's how I feel about it. That's how I feel about Stephen Hawking, and about Dr. Pippin, and about the entire enterprise, really, of attempting to understand the world and knowledge. I have attempted to show that it's a really difficult thing to do, and that it's also something that we all must and can do. And so that is, I think, the most important thing that anybody could take away from all these rambling posts of mine on different topics and seemingly disconnected parts that don't have unity, but they do fall into certain categories. Leo Strauss, Bob in postmodernism, Dr. Sternglass in physics, particle physics, filmmaking, my favorite films, how I think films could be made in the future, and my urging of Dr. Pippin to attempt to do something like a film of Hegel's phenomenology of spirit, because I think he'd be good at that job. I mean, I think if he undertook to do a film on the phenomenology of spirit of Hegel and showed each historical period and portrayed it for people, I think that Hegel's phenomenology of spirit could become as comprehensible, not perhaps to as many people, because not as many people like history, as astrophysics. But it could be that in the future, if he did that with some of his students, that he would make that as popular for people who like history as Dr. Hawking has for people who like astronomy.